3 months after a West Salem woman died from what was believed to be a freak accident, her own husband is now charged with killing her.
Hello there, and thanks for stopping by on this beautiful Monday. If you've never seen my face before, my name's Brooke, and I enjoy researching strange occurrences, true crime, conspiracy theories, etc., and sharing my findings with you. If those things are right up your alley, then please consider supporting the channel by hitting that subscribe button and smashing that like button. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into today's case. Todd Kendhammer and Barbara Adams were both born in 1970, but wouldn't have the opportunity to meet until 1986. It was at Barbara's brother David's wedding, who just so happened to be the groom of Todd's cousin, where the pair would meet. During the festivities of the reception, the reserved and quiet Todd was immediately drawn to Barb. She looked absolutely amazing in her wedding guest attire, and she just had an energy about her that really attracted Todd. Stepping out of his comfortable introverted state, Todd struck up a conversation with Barb, but was a bit disappointed to find out that she already had a boyfriend. Regardless, the two still got along really well and remained friends for a few years up until Barb ended up single. From there, the two decided to take their friendship to the next level and started dating for a few years before eventually getting married in 1991. Todd and Barb were your average everyday couple. They had jobs, Barb as a middle school educator and Todd working in a soda factory. In addition, Todd also replaced windshields as sort of a side hustle to bring in a little extra cash, and Barb would occasionally help him out with it, but the two also had another side hustle that they enjoyed together. The couple flipped houses in their spare time, and Barb really enjoyed the design aspect of it all, the remodeling, the layout, the staging, and on the other hand, Todd was a sort of handyman and took care of the manual labor. Their house flipping was more of a hobby than a moneymaker, since they weren't really making a significant profit after all was said and done. Regardless, it was something they still really enjoyed doing. In addition to their grind, Todd and Barb also had 2 children together. On September 16th, 2016, Todd and Barbara Kendhammer left their home at 7:30 a.m. and were driving north to Holman, Wisconsin. A little over 35 minutes later, after departing their home, Todd called 911 at 8:06 a.m. Todd reported to the 911 operator that while driving his 2009 Toyota Camry down a rural 2-lane highway, a truck driving south in the opposite direction lost a metal pipe from their flatbed. He explained that once the pipe fell from the truck, it broke through the windshield of the Camry and hit Barb. He said that Barb had immediately begun flailing around after the pipe struck her, but then quickly went unconscious. Todd said that he had attempted to pull off to the side of the road, but accidentally backed into a grassy ditch. He said that Barbara was bleeding from her nose, mouth, and ears, and was struggling to breathe, clearly not doing very well whatsoever. Todd climbed out of the car, pulled the pipe out of the windshield, threw it into the ditch behind him, and removed Barbara from the car before starting CPR on her and then calling police. While relaying all of this information to 911, Todd was acting extremely hysterical, which really isn't that odd considering he claims to have just seen his wife of 25 years gruesome death right before his eyes. That would, of course, without question, be horrifying if that's what actually happened. But let me not get ahead of myself. After his call, police arrived on the scene of the accident only 3 minutes later. As Todd was retelling the story to the officers, they noticed that he was acting extremely erratically, talking a million words a minute and repeating himself over and over again. The cops tried to give him the benefit of the doubt because, again, it was an awful thing to have just underwent. But they were still staying cautious because the longer they looked at the scene of this accident, the more suspicious it looked. After an ambulance had transported Barb from the scene to the hospital, police gave Todd a ride to see her. Tragically, Barb succumbed to her injuries in her hospital bed after being there for less than 24 hours. This is when police really started to crack down on Todd and get the answers to the many questions that this freak accident had raised. Back at the station during his interrogation, Todd was asked to retell the events events of that fateful day in extensive detail. But whenever the officers would ask him to further elaborate on something, it became more and more clear that his story was different each and every time he told it. The first inconsistency was that Todd claimed to have been traveling to the town of Holman in order to pick up his friend Justin's truck and replace the windshield. From Justin's house, the plan was for Barb to take the Camry and drive to work at the middle school. There are two major issues with this. The first being that police spoke with Justin and he denied ever needing his windshield replaced. He had recalled telling Todd before that he had another friend who needed a windshield repaired, but that friend ultimately decided against having it fixed and never set up any sort of arrangements for Todd to come over to his house and do so. Personally, I think it's highly unlikely that Todd was just being a thoughtful person and decided to drop in to replace a windshield unannounced an entire month after the fact, which is especially supported by the fact that Todd admitted that he didn't even know this friend of a friend's address who he was supposedly going to help. Todd tried changing his story again and said that it was another friend of a friend whose windshield needed replacing, but that guy denied having any issues with his windshield as well. A fun drinking game: go back and take a shot every single time I say windshield and you will be absolutely obliterated. All three of these guys who Todd had needlessly dragged into this story went on to testify in court that they hadn't the slightest idea of what Todd was talking about when it came to these repairs that he claimed to be doing that day. The second red flag was raised pretty high as well when police found out that Barbara was supposed to be at work that morning by 8 a.m. Todd did usually drive her to work, but according to the timeline of everything, Todd and Barb were supposedly driving to Holman after Barb was already supposed to have clocked in at 8. This was extremely out of character for Barb, according to her coworkers, and she was typically early and, at the latest, on time. This was so unusual, in fact, that her boss became worried after only 2 minutes and tried calling to check in on her with no response. And her boss wasn't the only one that was concerned either. Barbara had a routine of calling her mother each and every morning before she headed out to work, but that morning she never called. Todd claimed that this so-called accident happened around 8:06 a.m., but her coworkers and boss maintain that she would have called into work and let them know if she was going to be late, which implies to me that she either already knew that she was in danger and couldn't call into work, or that she was dead quite some time before 8 a.m. To the officer's questioning of Barbara being late to work, Todd insisted that Barb didn't have to be to work that morning until 8:30, which was a complete lie, obviously. Police even went as far as to print out all of Barb's work timesheets to prove that she had never gone into work at 8:30 any other day, and Todd was so shook by this evidence that he was like, you know what, you're actually right. I don't recall her going into work at 8:30 any other day either, but I just thought she was going in at 8:30 that day. The next problem is with this infamous truck from which a 53-inch, 10-pound pipe fell. Todd said that this truck had a really jank-looking makeshift flatbed, which is where the pipes were originally. But other than that, he couldn't remember anything about the driver or any identifying details of the truck. He said that it could have been green or black or blue, but he just didn't really know because he was drinking water when all of this happened. At first, Todd says that everything happened so quickly that he didn't even realize a pipe had fallen off the truck, and he just thought a bird hit the window. How he confused a bird hitting a window with a pipe bursting through the windshield, I don't know. This is where his storytelling really begins to drift out of the realm of reality and just gets so crazy. When they arrived to the scene, police noticed that Todd had cuts on his fingers, so they made sure to take pictures for documentation. He also had scratches on his chest and neck as well, but Todd claimed that these injuries had come from his job. Then, Todd goes on to tell police that he actually did see the pipe fall off the flatbed and somehow, with his inhumanly fast reflexes, tried to punch his hand out to stop the pipe from hitting Barb. I don't know about all of you watching this, but the way my reflexes work, they would have had me swerving the car off the road sooner than they'd have me punch towards a large flying object that was coming through my windshield. I'm sure many of you have experienced like a pebble hitting your windshield when you're on the interstate or something like that, and even the tiniest little rock can make a startling sound. I just can't imagine my reaction to that being like going towards something while I'm driving, but that's just me. It also really just doesn't make any sense as to why he would have injuries on the back of his hand if he were trying to push the pipe. And let me remind you that he did all of this while also drinking water. It's really amazing how all of that worked out. Most of the damage that Todd had sustained was to his left hand, but number one, Todd was right-handed. And number two, he would have had to reach his hand across his body to the opposite side of the car for this maneuver to happen. And number three, if this pipe had the momentum to practically go through Barb's entire body, wouldn't his hand just be a little bit worse off than just a few scratches if he tried to punch at it? A medical examiner determined that Barbara's death was caused by blunt force trauma, but also found out that she had suffered head and neck injuries, had strangulation marks around her neck, bruises on her arms, torn fingernails, and bruising on the inside of her lips, as if there had been firm pressure applied over her mouth. Strangely, she had absolutely no glass shards inside of her body, which was very odd considering the nature of this alleged accident. It's pretty clear that none of these injuries align with being hit by a pipe. The medical examiner also noted that it appeared as if Barb had been struck in the head 3 separate times. Possibly the most damning evidence of all was the fact that Todd's DNA was found underneath Barb's fingernails, which I'm 99% certain explain the scratches on his neck and chest. When police told Todd that they found this evidence under Barb's fingernails, he just said, "And that's fine." Like, I'm sorry, but what? Crime scene analysts actually found that the pipe had hit the windshield twice, and when the pipe hit the windshield the second time, it went through the glass, which is what actually ended up leaving some very significant evidence. It was determined by the way that the glass shards had shattered after they broke the windshield was that the vehicle was parked and the passenger door was open, since there was no glass found in the pockets of the door. The glass was also evenly distributed across the passenger seat, as if nobody had been sitting there when the windshield broke. Police tried replicating the event several times, but no matter how many trials they did, they couldn't find a way that it was physically possible for this event to happen in the way that Todd had described it. When police searched the trunk, they found both rust from the pipe that had supposedly fallen off the back of this truck, along with some grass from the ditch, meaning that the trunk had been opened and closed while sitting there. You know, it's almost as if he took this rusty pipe out of the trunk and threw it through the windshield while the car was parked after he had already taken Barbara out of the car and strangled/beat her to death. In case you needed any more evidence that this entire story is a work of fiction, a man who was driving down that very same highway reported to police that he had seen the Toyota Camry in the ditch with the passenger door open and no occupants inside the vehicle. Even more interesting was the fact that he said that the windshield was completely intact at that point at 8:02 a.m. Neighbors who lived off of that highway also provided authorities with security camera footage which showed Todd's Camry and 3 other vehicles, but there was no sign of a blue, black, or green truck with a makeshift bed anywhere in sight. Police went through Todd's cell phone and read the text messages between he and Barb, and they found that Todd was very controlling of her, despite his loved ones describing him as just protective. In reality, it seems as if Todd had become very codependent on his wife, calling her several times throughout the day while she was at work and getting upset if she didn't answer immediately. Things were clearly not as perfect on the outside as the world had seemed to think. It was never actually discovered uncovered where exactly Todd killed his wife, but if I had to guess based on the timeline, he possibly went into the ditch and did so, which is why the passerby didn't see them and just saw the Camry abandoned in the ditch. I then assumed that Todd got the pipe out of the trunk to break the windshield. But wherever he truly committed this awful crime, he apparently did it well enough to get rid of any evidence at that location, and it's really just amazing to me how he managed to clean up so thoroughly that no evidence was found, but he didn't take some of that energy and consider how implausible this entire story he came up with actually was. I don't even know if he had a cover story to begin with. I think he might have just been making it up as he went, which is why he could never keep his story straight. Aside from Todd's obvious lying, one of the most difficult parts of this investigation and trial in 2017 was not having a true motive behind the murder. Throughout the court proceedings and to this day, Todd, his family, and many members of Barb's family believe that their marriage was truly perfect and that Barb's death was a result of a freak accident. Many of Todd's loved ones stood as character witnesses during his trial, and his defense cited Todd's clean criminal record as a reason why he couldn't have possibly harmed his wife. Even after seeing all of this evidence in court, all but one of Barb's own family members sided with Todd. Others believe that Todd and Barb got into an argument over some debts that Todd had incurred and beat her to death in a violent rage. The prosecution had no problem pointing out the inconsistent and blatant lies from Todd that he had told during his interrogations and his time on the stand. After the 9-day trial, Todd Kendhammer was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole after 30 years, which will be in 2048. After his sentencing, Todd was very quick to hire high-profile lawyer Jerome Buting, who represented Stephen Avery in the Netflix series Making a Murderer. They are working extensively to either have Todd exonerated or have a retrial granted. Other than the fact that I think it's pretty obvious that Todd Kendhammer is not the sharpest tool in the shed, I really don't have a ton to say about this case. According to the evidence, I think it's pretty clear that he killed Barbara with his bare hands and then staged the entire pipe story. As far as a motive, I think it is possible that all of their problems stemmed from money, because isn't that the number one cause of marital issues and divorce? I don't know, but it was also made evident that Todd was very controlling of Barbara despite how perfect everyone thought their relationship was. Maybe that's just further proof that nobody really knows what was going on behind the scenes. Listening to Todd's call to 911 where he takes the time to tell his dying wife in the background, "You're going to be okay, Barb."
You're gonna be okay, Barb. You're gonna be okay, Barb. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay, Barb. You're gonna be okay.
Knowing that he is the only reason that she is in this situation to begin with, and that he felt the right to take his wife of 25 years' life, is beyond disturbing to me. And I say this in the most respectful and unironic way that in my insignificant opinion on the matter, which nobody asked for, denial is literally the first step of grief. It really is easier to accept that this freak accident happened to the fault of no one, rather than to just lose two people at once and believe that the remaining one was a horrible human being. My final thought after researching this case is that I want justice for Barbara. I just feel like not enough people who actually knew her stood up for her when she was clearly the victim here, and that is just so sad for me to think about. Todd is getting at least 30 years in prison, so that is some sort of consequence, but I don't know. I just feel like not enough people were Team Barbara. You know what I mean? I'm Team Barbara over here. Anyone else Team Barbara? And with that, we've come to the end of today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so we can meet up right back here next week. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys!